Welcome, everybody, to the Only Podcast. This is Chris Vanini. I'm your host, joined by Austin Smith, as always. This is going to be a quicker podcast because we're recording this on a Tuesday. MSU plays Illinois on Wednesday. The schedule made it hard to find a good day to do a podcast, so we're not going to go long here because some of this podcast will be out of date.
Before you get too far,
Probably about
forget what you always forget.
Yes. Go to theonlycolors.com and read a lot of the good stuff that's up there. Austin puts in a hell of a lot of work. Read what he writes.
Social media. Comment
on the stories. Follow at The Only Colors on Twitter, as well as at Chris Vanini and at ACSmith06 for Austin. There's a lot of good stuff up there, some of which pertains to what we're Austin, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Just like you said, I'm riding high after that win last Sunday, so feeling good.
So we're going to start off on the opposite end of that spectrum, and that is Mark Dantonio breaking his silence, quotes and quote breaking his silence for 19 days since this sexual assault investigation has been going on, to release a heavily lawyered up statement that basically says as soon as they found out about anything, they suspended the guys. They're trying to comply with everything there is. There's a criminal investigation going on, and the statement emphasized that the school is doing its own, Title IX type of investigation type of deal. This also comes on the heels of some comments by the media about how Dantonio was handling this wrong by not saying anything, because MSU opened up spring ball last Saturday, and there's no media availability on the horizon. Austin, obviously, we still don't know any details about the investigation, but in terms of Dantonio coming out with a statement, in terms of him deciding to stay silent, or at least being ordered to stay silent, what are your thoughts on kind of how he's handling this?
Yeah, this has been kind of a point of contention, I think, between myself and some other people on social media. It's just, I'm glad that they put out a statement, but it's exactly what you should have expected. I mean, it is good that they're addressing the issue and just saying what they can say. But at this point, it's an open investigation, and you're not going to get anything more than you just got. So I'm glad they did it. I'm not surprised that they've put a gag order on Dantonio, and I hate to see I hope people don't blame him in particular for all of this, because this is definitely not – I would be shocked if this is Mark Dantonio doing this on his own volition. I have a feeling this is coming from not just the AD, but the university, just with all the different things going on. Like you said, I thought it was interesting that they didn't I guess it wasn't interesting that he hasn't talked to anyone, but they didn't release a depth chart either, which I thought
was true too.
That was somewhat interesting because they clearly don't want any, there are rumors as to who's involved, and that's inevitable, but they clearly don't want to give any concrete things for people to go on. So I think at this point, everybody just, like I said, I'm glad that they're addressing it. I'm glad that, they're putting out what they can, but I wouldn't expect to hear from Dantonio until probably close to the spring game, if not maybe a little bit before. So I'm glad they did it overall.
There's the football account tweeted a few days ago to sign up for a meet and greet with Dantonio at the spring game or something. And my first reaction is, I feel like the local media should apply for that.
Yeah, you might get a couple guys have thrown their names in there. I have a feeling they'll be systematically eliminated, but might not be the fairest poll.
But yeah, I will work under the impression Dantonio has been ordered to stay silent. Kind of along the same lines, one reason Joe Mixon was so silent for so long at Oklahoma regarding his assault was because he said he was told to be silent, and I don't think that helped him at all throughout the process. I think if Dantonio had released this statement a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and said, nothing until then, it would at least look like they have things under control. It looks like they don't know what they're doing right now in terms of what they should say or shouldn't say. To not say anything about to have a statement come out on a Tuesday, like after you've already opened spring ball, just seems very just decided to do it. basically. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's due to the deserved media pressure and that comes along with that. So, yeah, my guess is that's why he's not saying anything. Not only, I mean, he's got that to talk about, but yeah, I mean, this is the time of year when you're out there talking to media. It's not good for local media. It's going to be a very interesting relationship with media as it goes forward, because I mean, this isn't like an Izzo situation where, you know, Tom's pretty open, or if he feels like he's not being fair to the media, he'll, you know, make up for it in some way, maybe talk more at some point. Very curious to see how that relationship is going forward. But obviously with the investigation still going on, you know, nobody's been charged yet. Kind of got to wait and see how that plays out. Had D'Antonio talked, another thing he would have been asked about is the transfer of linebacker John Reschke. After he said in a statement that he basically had said something out of emotion that he very much regretted, and everybody seemed to feel it was best that he move on. There have been rumors going around about that for a month or two. I'm not going to get into. I don't want to, you know, get into the specifics of any of that, but the statement would seem to confirm those rumors. And I think most telling was Darian Harris, former MSU linebacker and captain, was on Jack Ebling's radio show and asked about it. And he said, Harris said that Reschke reached out to him with a very emotional apology. And Harris basically said he wanted nothing to do with him. And that's a pretty, I think, damning statement about what the feeling is on the team about John Reschke after whatever happened. What was your kind of reaction when that came out?
Yeah, like you said, there had been, you know, rumors out there for a little while now, actually, about this. And so, you know, like you said, I thought the Darian Harris aspect of this was the most damning part of the whole thing. You know, obviously, and Darian Harris is, as any MSU media member or fan would ever tell you, one of the nicest, most open, genuine human beings around. There's a reason. Sorry, go ahead.
And one of the most respected guys among teammates.
Exactly. I mean, voted a captain, even though I don't think anybody would call him the most, you know, talented player on that team, especially on the teams that he was on, but voted a captain anyway as a senior. You know, I think that really says kind of all you need to know. And I think it speaks to kind of a larger issue just within one of the objectives of this offseason. I said this kind of right after this whole thing happened, was it's got to be getting back to the culture that made Michigan State so great. It's become pretty obvious that there was a huge divide in that locker room last year, and that a lot of guys, I mean, you and I talked about it ad nauseum about just the leadership void, the fact that no one really seemed to care that much in a lot of these situations. There was no one really steering the ship from a player perspective. And, you know, to cross sports, Izzo always says his best teams are player-led teams. I think that kind of applies across every single team sport, and certainly is the case in football. And that just was a huge part that was lacking from last year's team. So I think the hard reset, and, you know, you hate to say it about like a kid, but, you know, getting rid of those bad those points of contention and kids that aren't, you know, if he would have come back, it would have just divided not only the locker room, but I mean, with everything the program's going through, it would have just driven that stake even deeper. So I think getting, you know, back to a hard reset, getting back to that chip on the shoulder, getting back to that like family atmosphere where everybody's fighting for each other, everybody's each other's brother and got each other's backs. That's what made those teams so good for so long. And that's kind of the program D'Antonio's always preached and really had implemented. And so I think it's unfortunate, certainly from a football perspective, and from, you know, I'm sure John Reschke regrets everything, like he said, that he said. But I think at this point, it's definitely in the best interest of the program, and in John's case, I would say to probably go their separate ways. So,
yeah, and I think the fact that, you know, the way they worded that statement, it wasn't just he's leaving and there's nothing there. Like, he was, I'm gonna guess it was his request to make it so detailed of an explanation as perhaps a show of remorse, a public show of remorse.
Right.
But yeah, it was
it's
surprising. It was surprising to see a statement like that. What were you saying?
Yeah, it was a very personal statement, and it's too bad because by all accounts, John Reschke was like a leader. He was a guy that people rallied around in that clubhouse for a long time. And, you know, it must have been bad to have him leave the team like that and make the apology so personal. So, like I said, I think it's in everybody's best interest. It's a shame, but, you know, listen, if it's all about resetting the culture, then the things that happen like that just aren't excusable.
Yeah, and on the field, it's another
huge loss.
Starting linebacker loss. We don't really have a depth chart to judge the team off of right now. Frankly, we don't even have an accurate roster because, you know, depending on who may be involved in this sexual assault investigation, so there's not really much we can say about the football team right now. D'Antonio is going to be facing a hell of a lot of heat the next time he gets up there for a press conference.
Yes, he is.
And not only he, but I'm very curious to see which players step up. Like, this is the time when you find out who the leaders are, who's going to be the spokesman for the team to go in front of the media and say, this is what this is what we feel about the investigation. Yep. This is what we feel about the rescue situation. This is what we feel about this, because you can't shield everybody forever. And, you know, that, you know, it happened today. Kirk Cousins gets his new franchise tag, $24 million. And one of the first things I thought about when I saw that was, this team needs a Kirk Cousins type of guy.
Yep, 1,000%.
Kirk Cousins was the guy that rallied around after Rather Hall that was at the end of the 2009 season. But he was a guy who kind of had everybody had his back, you know, elected captain as a sophomore. Who was going to be that guy in this team? They did not have it last year. You know, whether it was the seniors not being good leaders, whether it was the freshmen not listening to the leaders, you know, based on how things have gone in the offseason, I think it's across the board. Obviously, the leadership and chemistry was really bad. And, you know, this sexual assault investigation comes right after D'Antonio was at the AFCA convention, coaches convention in Asheville. I was there. And he said the worst thing a coach can say about your team is that you're undisciplined. And he said that last year's team was undisciplined. And heading into the offseason, that clearly has not been fixed.
Yeah.
So a lot of questions, a lot of questions about, you know, the current program, the future of the program, D'Antonio's legacy, frankly. You know, we're going to see who, if anybody, who steps up front to, you know, handle that. So that's where football's at right now. Switching over to basketball, things have turned around in a big way for your MSU basketball team. They get their first kind of, I think, marquee win of the year, beating Wisconsin at home pretty comfortably. I mean, they led almost throughout. They ended up winning by 10. You know, they did play Nebraska, which we not gonna really talk about because it was a blowout and, you know, whatever happened. Wisconsin game, story of the game to me was Nick Ward could not be stopped. 22 points, 9 for 12 shooting, 9 rebounds, 6 offensive rebounds. The only thing that stopped him was picking up fouls, and he only ended up playing 19 minutes. So he seems to have gotten over that wall. Miles Bridges back doing his thing, and guys that stepped up in the place of Aaron Harris. It was a mix of guys. It was Matt McQuaid. It was Kyle Ahrens hitting a big three. What'd you take away from the Wisconsin game?
Yeah, I'm going to touch quickly on Nebraska, and it kind of melds.
Yeah, go ahead.
It kind of melds together with Wisconsin as well. And that is, like you said, guys stepping up to replace Aaron Harris. I hate the fact that this rotation has been frustrating for me personally all season. I felt like it was one player too big. And they had to play so many guys out of position that Izzo's been mixing and matching. But unfortunately, it happened because of Harris getting injured. But that one extra guard finally got taken out of the rotation. And you could tell that Izzo has been in McQuaid's ear. He was in Josh Langford's ear. And those guys have been much more aggressive. Like Langford was very aggressive against Nebraska. And when he hits those little mid-range and those threes, it's the prettiest stroke of anybody on the team. And then you saw McQuaid put on like a Superman cape like we had never seen before against Wisconsin. So I think those guards stepping up. Ironically, Alvin Ellis has started the last 2 games and has played 2 of his worst games in a long time. But I love that Izzo got in their ear and was like, listen, this is your chance now. We just lost our senior leader. There is no more time to wait. Go be aggressive, get your shots up. And I've said all year, we've agreed on it, that they just need guys to be aggressive and show confidence more than anything else, like be a threat. For so long on the wing, it was just get the ball, maybe take one dribble, pass it back to the point guard. And when it's Tum in there, it's just he passes it to the other guard, and then they kind of pass it back and forth. And then you throw up a last-second shot. That's not offense. And they haven't done that often at all in the last 2 games. So I thought that was huge. I thought the biggest part that stood out to me against Wisconsin was kind of twofold. One was the post defense. Wisconsin threw the ball into the post. I don't know what his usage rate was, but Nigel Hayes had the ball. It seemed like every single dime down the floor. Mm-hmm. Took 22. He scored 22 points, but took 22 shots to get there. I thought the post defense of Bridges and Ward, a lot of the fouls they got called were really ticky-tack, but they did such a good job of keeping Happ and Hayes from dominating that game. When Wisconsin went in with a game plan that should have beaten Michigan State. I mean, that's the game plan. And they have the people to do it. They have the players to do it. Perhaps more so than anybody in the Big Ten outside of Purdue. Just hammer the ball in the paint. And I thought they played so well down there. And like you said, Ward was unstoppable offensively. But the show stealer of the whole game was Cassius Winston. He managed to go 2 of 11 from the field.
And a lot of those were missed layups. I mean, a lot of those misses were right around the rim.
Right, but he almost got a triple-double. He had like 10 points, 8 boards, 7 assists, or maybe it was 8 assists and 7 boards.
8 assists, 7 boards. Okay.
But, and I wrote this up after the game, but it's rare that you can go 2 of 11 from the field and still be the guy that you point to and say he was probably the deciding factor in the game, because it was when Ward and Bridges went to the bench in the second half in foul trouble. I mean, you had one of those lineups that gives us all nightmares as Michigan State fans. It was like the Arns, when it was like Arns, McQuaid, Winston, Goins, and Tum might have even been in there too.
You talking in the second half?
Yeah, second half, midway through the second half.
Yeah, right when Aaron should have 3 like right away.
Yep, but that was all Cassius. It's all Cassius Winston. He set up Goins for a really pretty little lay-in. He found Aaron's, and you heard him after the game. He was like, he loves that trailer 3, and he found him right in his motion, and he just nailed it. So that maturation is just so big. To having a playmaker like Cassius Winston out there is just going to be, if Michigan State's able to keep this momentum going, he's going to be a big part of it. So that was long-winded, but it's just an impressive game.
Yeah, the freshmen have pushed through that wall a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even Langford finished with 9 points. He had a really good game against Nebraska too. Those guys have kind of carried them the last 2 games, and that's what they need to. And the funny thing about McQuaid, he hit 4 of 6 2-point shots. He had only made 13 2-point shots on the entire year. Like the drives and the pull-ups, just like a completely different player. A guy you have really been down on.
Oh yeah, dogged, openly dogged all season.
and he comes back with 15 points.
Hey.
And another thing about Winston, Nairn didn't even play all that poorly. Nairn actually played pretty well, I thought.
Yeah, I agree.
When he was in, but as soon as Winston in that first half, as soon as Winston came in, he's just a game changer. He just can do things offensively that Nairn can't, and that led them on that.
He's a rare feel for the offensive side of the game. He just knows where guys are going to be. He's able to. I mean, he can get his own shot too. I think when he's really going to take the next step when he's able to be a consistent jump shooter. He's not a bad jump shooter right now, but he's got a bit of a hitch in his shot with his legs. When that gets pure, and when he's able to finish around the basket more, I mean, you're talking about a all Big Ten type of point guard. And you could see, like you said, he broke through that freshman wall. He doesn't look like he's not a freshman. These guys aren't freshmen anymore. That was their 30th game of the season. Or this is upcoming as their 30th game of the season. Like, you're not freshmen anymore. And they're not playing like it. Miles Bridges hasn't played like it very often. Neither has Nick Ward. But the other two, you can really tell.
Bridges kind of played like a freshman at Purdue, I think. He got
lazy,
flustered as we talked about it. And another huge part of this game was the free throw line.
Absolutely.
MSU goes 21 of 23 at the line, and both misses were by Bridges. Nick Ward went 4 for 4, McQuaid 4 for 4, Winston 4 for 4, and Ellis 2 for 2. And Wisconsin goes 13 for 25. That is a 8-point difference in a 10-point game.
Well, and it was all Hayes too.
Yeah, and Hayes goes 4 for 12 at the line. Ethan Happ also went 0 for 3 though. So that's what we talked about early in the year. The free throws can be something that turn a close game into a comfortable win, which is what happened here, or it can turn a game that should be a comfortable win into a nail biter, or it could cost you a game. And in some games, it has really hurt them. But this was a big one. And Ward's gotten a lot better at the free throw line in the last month. That'll be really interesting, kind of in these final few games here. Fun thing about that is, MSU came into this game obviously near the bottom of the country in free throw making, but also free throw defense, in that their opponent just happened to make a ton of free throws. Wisconsin was in the same situation. They're not a good free throw shooting team, and their opponents hit a lot. So MSU kind of got the edge in that kind of free throw battle that might have been up in the air. So that was huge part of the game. So MSU sits at 18-11, 2 road games left at Illinois, at Maryland in the Big Ten tournament. Austin, are they in the tournament?
I don't want to. At this point, see, the funny part about this whole thing is that we said if they went 2-2 through their last 4 games of the regular season, that they are in, pretty much no questions asked.
I didn't.
Well, maybe not. We thought they put themselves in an advantageous position. I think 19 wins. Okay, so here, let me backtrack a little bit. I don't think that they are full blown in the tournament yet, because but all they got to do is win one more game. I really think if you get to 19 wins, you're in. If they lose their last 3, I wouldn't be surprised if they get left out. I mean, then you have the pundits can point to. I mean, you're sitting there at 18-14. The pundits can point to the Aaron Harris injury. They can point to the losing streak. You would have lost. You'd probably get knocked down into that second tier in the Big Ten tournament and lose to a double-digit seed. But all I think they got to do is win one more, and then I feel like they should feel pretty good at 19 wins.
Yes, 19, you're in.
Yeah.
18-14 ties you for the most losses ever in the tournament by an at-large team. Now, it is a very weak bubble, but correct. And it's worth noting, they are favored. KenPom has MSU as the underdog in the next 2 games, Illinois and Maryland. Now, if you lose those, maybe you end up playing a Rutgers or a Penn State or an Iowa in the in the NCAA in the Big Ten tournament, and you lose that, and then that's a really bad loss to cap off everything. one more win, and they're in. They finally kind of got a marquee win, I think, against Wisconsin that they needed.
Yep.
But, they've won now 6 of 8, but they've lost those 2 games by a combined 40-something points.
Yeah. They've been bad. They've been blowout losses, but I guess
they won. They won the home games, lost the road games, and they won at Nebraska. And so now 2 road games: Illinois and Maryland. And KenPom has been higher on Illinois than everybody else was for quite some time. And now Illinois comes into this game kind of on the bubble, and they're now fighting for an NCAA tournament spot. They are at 17-12. They've won 3 in a row against they've won 4 or 5, 2 of which are Northwestern, because Northwestern's kind of starting to slide down toward that bubble again. So these are 2 teams that MSU hasn't played. Have you done any research on Illinois yet, and what do you think? Malcolm Hill is their top guy, puts up a ton of points, has a high usage. What else about the Illini?
Yeah, like you said, you got it. I did a bunch of research on him today and kind of wrote the preview today. This is a better team than you think. I'm not surprised that KenPom is a little higher on them. I mean, they are 17-12. It's kind of funny. They, as a team, they've had plenty of chances to win big games. They played big teams in the non-con. They played West Virginia. They played Florida State. Lost both of those games. And then every big team they've played in the Big Ten, aside from those games against Northwestern, and they did beat Michigan.
They whooped Michigan and then changed Michigan's season because they called Michigan a white-collar team, or someone in Illinois called Michigan a white-collar team, and Michigan hasn't been the same team since.
Right. So thank you for that, Illinois. So they have won those games, but I mean that's it. That's the peak of their wins. They haven't beaten a team that right now is projected to be any higher than, I think, Northwestern's maybe an 8. Michigan somewhere around 8-9, kind of depends. So they're in a weirdly similar situation to Michigan State going into that Wisconsin game, is in that they have hung with some of the better teams they've played that have had plenty of good game opportunities, but just haven't closed that one big win. I don't think Michigan State, I mean, sure, it's a nice resume builder, but I still think they gotta beat Michigan State. Then they play Rutgers after that. I think they need to win those 2 games and then probably win at least a game or 2 in the tournament to make up for not having that marquee win. But that doesn't mean this isn't a good team. It's also one of the things I noticed is that they have 6 seniors on this team, and 5 of them play 14, 15 minutes a game. That includes their 2 leading scorers, which is Malcolm Hill, who has a chance to be first or second. He'll probably be at least second team All Big Ten, if not first. And Maverick Morgan, who as ridiculous as his name is, he's a pretty effective center. But
6'10", for those wondering about the matchup with Nick Ward, that's a pretty good size.
Well, and he's not their only big guy either. They have is it Finke? Is that his last name?
Michael Finke.
Mike Finke. So he's a 6'10" sophomore that shoots over 40% from outside. So if they try to go big
and 55% inside, he's actually taking more threes than he has twos.
Right. So I mean, you've got a stretch, or more or less a stretch for Maverick Morgan, also at 6'10", and Malcolm Hill's 6'6" as a swingman. I mean, they bring a lot of size, and their guards can shoot too. Tracy Abrams shoots 42% from outside. So
I can't believe he's still there.
I know. I couldn't believe it either when I saw that. I thought he was gone ages ago, but still, it's not an easy matchup, and it's senior night for them. This is going to be the thing I came away from reading about this team thinking the most is that this is going to be Michigan State's biggest mental test of the entire year, because they're going into a environment. It's going to be a fired up environment. It's senior night against a senior loaded team. A team that does probably, with winning 4 or 5, they're playing confident basketball. They think they're back on the bubble. They're going to come out fired up. And Michigan State is sitting there, coming off of this huge emotional high. They finally got that marquee win, between pregame and postgame with Aaron Harris. There's just so much emotion there. And it's still a team of technically, they're 30 games in, like I said, so they're not really freshmen anymore, but these are still young kids. This is the first time they're going to have to go through this type of thing. And so it's going to be a big gut check. It's going to be a big gut check. So I think if they could come out and win this one, I know it's against Illinois, but that would be a really impressive. It would be a very impressive win to me because of what it says about the maturation of these guys.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, this MSU team has two road wins in the Big Ten, and one of them was the very first Big Ten game of the year.
Right.
They stunk at Indiana, they stunk at Purdue, they stunk at Michigan, they stunk at Penn State, and it's a bunch of seniors against a bunch of freshmen. Illinois doesn't do anything particularly great looking at their KenPom profile, but it's going to come down to the matchups, like you said. The big guy, big guys who can shoot. Basically, going to come down to it's going to be an individual matchup game. Is what's going to come down to. So that's that. They play Maryland on Saturday. Maryland is a team that comes in at 23-7. They had lost 3 straight before whooping on Rutgers. This is actually, they will have had. They played Rutgers tonight. They whooped them by 20. This will be their senior night too. Maryland comes in. Again, not particularly great at anything looking at them, but they're just overall better. They're 37th in offense, 65th in defense. But they've kind of been slagging a bit. The KenPom numbers have never really liked Maryland for quite a few years now. But the road game, obviously, going to be a tough one. Melo Trimble's a very good player. Have you done any look at
I haven't done a lot of research into Maryland, but I have watched them play a couple times this season.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that stood out to me in particular that I'm not sure this is actually a good team. I kind of think that I
haven't thought that for years.
Yeah. Okay. So I kind of agree with you. I'm not convinced they're good. I kind of think that they're still riding the Melo Trimble wave of, it's Melo Trimble, and he had this great freshman year.
I mean, it's like the name brand. They started 20-2. They went into the month of February at 20-2.
Right.
They had a ton of close wins, but
I will say this: I watched.
Well, here's it. They were 20-2, and they were ranked, and they were 38th in KenPom.
Right. It's not much of a schedule. They didn't play. I mean, look at their non. I'm looking at their non-conference right now.
It's ranked 195th. They're not.
They didn't play anybody. They played at Georgetown and won by a point. And then
beat Kansas State by a point. Beat Richmond in overtime.
Lost by 14 to Pitt. I mean, you didn't play any.
Beat Oklahoma State by 1. But that's what I'm saying. They keep all these games. They going into Big Ten. They beat Michigan by 7. They beat Indiana by 3. They beat Ohio State by 6. They lose to Purdue by 1. Lose to Penn State by 6. A ton of close games with this team. So
except for recently, their last three losses were all double digits. And I will say the last game of theirs that I watched was against Wisconsin, and they went into that second half up, I think 7 at half. Yeah. And they were, and I know Wisconsin's a good defensive team. But they completely fell apart offensively in the second half.
I think I remember a tweet from you that said they stopped running.
Well, they stopped running their offense. It was Melo Trimble, and they kind of did like a loose pick and roll, and that was it. I mean, they have a lot of dudes that are good 3-point. Actually, they really don't. They only have a couple guys that are plus 3-point shooters, but
just Justin Jackson at 44% among their kind of regulars.
Herder is at 37, but. Like they have a lot of guys. I feel like they have fallen into the wait for Melo Trimble to do something and then react to it, or you know what I mean. Like it's Melo Trimble's show. And listen, Michigan State's struggled against some of the better point guards in the Big Ten this year. They did a really nice job against Koenig on Sunday, but Melo Trimble could pop and they could get buried. But I almost in a weird way feel better about the game at Maryland than I do about the game at Illinois in like a weird way. But I think they're both very winnable games for Michigan State. I think they're both huge mental tests that are really going to test the maturity of this team and really how far they've progressed. I think the recipe is fairly simple for offensive success for Michigan State. got to have one of those guards going. Cassius has got to be a playmaker, and then you feed Bridges and Ward. The question is, have they gotten to a point where they know that and they can actually go out and execute it game in and game out? They've done it recently, but these last 2 games are going to be big, because I think you either go from, you could fall out of the tournament altogether. You could stay squarely on the bubble and bring a lot of the questions that we've had about them back, or you could really take a step forward and be a 7 or an 8 seed that teams don't want to play in the second round of the tournament. Michigan State, they've done it time and time again before, and they're starting to heat up. So I think these next 2 are going to be really, really, hopefully really fun, but really interesting either way.
Yeah. So, KenPom has Illinois by 2 and Maryland by 5. This team seems to be, every time this team seems to be hitting a stride, they go on the road and get demolished. So we'll see if that's this again. We'll talk to you guys in a week. They will have played both of these games. They could either be solidly in, or suddenly the Big Ten tournament is a huge thing going forward. Has this team finally actually crossed some sort of line? We'll see. Also really cool, Izzo, I heard Izzo say that he got the idea to put Aaron Harris out there at the end of the game, I think the night before, because Aaron Harris was being great in the film room and with talking with young guys and stuff like that, which I think is a good sign to see from a senior situation like that. So it was very cool that Izzo did that. Cool that Aaron Harris got that moment. It hasn't been the most, positive experience that he's had at MSU in terms of kind of expectations versus what he's done, but seems to be handling this well. 2 big games for MSU these next couple of days. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you next week. See you.